ambitious system for climate neutrality. And this is 15th SAA lecture on the topic making housing more affordable. How can new European Bauhaus help? So I would like to welcome you all on the behalf of SAA, TU Graz and SDEWES in this setup in a hybrid mode. So I would like to welcome all the participants online, but also here in the room. So now we have the last presentations were finished in SDEWES conference, so we can expect some more audience in the room. So currently we have registered for this lecture the audience from 12 European countries, both 2 African countries, and I can see here participants from Australia, New Zealand, etc. So we are really representing the world here. So our speakers for this evening are Sorha Edwards from Housing Europe, Stefan Moser from European Commission, and Ashir Kilkish here with me from TÜBİTAK in Turkey. So I would like also to make another warm welcome for Initiate project and the Merge project partners, and of course all participants from all the countries. I would also like to welcome our colleagues from SAA member organization and all the other participants. I would really give you a warm welcome. So now at the beginning I would like to ask our director of SAA, Brigitte Hasven, to give us introductions note why this SAA lecture series, what is all about and what are the aims. So Brigitte, can you explain us what is about?
Goran. Thank you for handing over. Welcome also, heartfelt welcome to all of you from my side. I just wanted to explain a little bit about why we have this lecture series. It's really because we think we need to talk more. We need to find time for an open and scientifically informed dialogue and think about how to find the best solutions and to discuss those solutions with all societal representatives. Tonight's evening lecture is about affordable housing and why also connected to the European Bauhaus. This evening lecture is very timely because people are really at the core of the Green Deal, but people are struggling. So how can the transition towards climate neutrality be fair and just? So the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has formulated a leitmotif, which is to leave no one behind. And currently there are 55 billion euros dedicated to just transition mechanism for phasing out coal and for greening energy intensive industries. But what are we going to do about costly housing in European cities? Housing prices are up by 20% compared to 2015, and building permits down by 20%. This is a real social crisis. How can new European Bauhaus movement help to foster beautiful and sustainable, but also togetherness in the built environment? And so I'm really curious to find out from our speakers how just transition could work in practice. So on behalf of the organizers, I wish you a great evening discussion. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brigitte. And I now would like to just introduce you to the topic. So what is the topic that we are discussing? So the new European Bauhaus movement is looking to implement innovative approaches for sustainable, inclusive, beautiful and affordable housing. Much is asked from urban living space. It needs to become a more climate resilient, aesthetically pleasing and contribute to the well-being of all inhabitants. How can we make sure that it's still affordable? How can construction, renovation and retrofitting be managed to avoid massive increase of housing prices? This ambition is very strongly reaffirmed by Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in her 2025 State of the Union speech. The European Green Deal will leave no one behind. Is this so? Or does really inequalities and inventable trade-offs, creating winners and losers. This inspiring lecture will dive into key policies and tools designed to support fair and inclusive green transition, explore whether the costs of change are being shared in a way that is socially fair and balanced, highlight real-world success stories and best practice from across the Europe, but maybe we can hear also some from the other parts of the world, and show how cutting-edge research and innovation and new engagement strategies can help guide us toward a smoother, more united path forward. So first, in this format, we will have an invited lecture given by Sorcha Edwards, and then we will have 2 responses. So now, Sorcha Edwards is General Secretary of Housing Europe, and before, I hope Sorcha is here, yeah? Okay, can we hear you? Yeah. Okay, so I just would like to introduce the speaker for tonight. So, as I said, Sorcha Edwards is General Secretary of Housing Europe and European Federation of Public, Cooperative and Social Housing since 2014. Housing Europe brings together public, cooperative and social housing providers from across the Europe. They share a vision of Europe which provides access to decent and affordable housing for all in communities which are socially, economically, environmentally sustainable, and where everyone is enabled to reach their full potential. The sector manages 25 million homes and delivers over 200,000 new homes and renovations annually. Sorcha Edwards leads the team and coordinates the network for maximum impact, aiming at better regulation, better knowledge, and better finance for housing in EU and international policy making. Under her leadership, Housing Europe has become a point of reference for sustainable housing system in Europe and beyond. Her academic career, which led her to the position, covered business and languages at Dublin City University, University of Salamanca, and University of Ulster, to Masters in European Studies at the University of Leuven, and postgraduate diploma in sustainability in built environment at the East London University. So we have really experts here who can show us what we can expect of housing in Europe in the future. So, Sorcha, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope it's working.
Yeah, we can see you, and okay.
Yes. Okay, so thank you very much. I think the opening words are very pertinent. We really face this existential challenge to decarbonize our homes, obviously decarbonize our societies, but it makes the fact that we have this housing affordability crisis makes it much more complex in the built environment in the residential sector. Because we have to make sure that the decarbonization processes don't actually exacerbate or make the affordability crisis even worse. So it's really this reconciliation that's extremely challenging. And I must say, because we still have such strong speculation in the sector, so many countries leaving housing exclusively to market forces, hoping that the market will solve the problem, we see that this is not leading us in the right direction. So the decarbonization in housing has to take many different paths. I mean, if we look at it in a holistic way, we also link to mobility. So how much carbon is actually emitted for people to travel from their home to their work and to services. We have to look at the materials, so the embodied carbon when we are constructing. We have to look at the use phase, so how much energy we're actually using to heat and cool. Look at also climate adaptation, how much work is needed, how much investment is needed for the climate adaptation, so resistance to heat islands, to flooding. So it's quite a, let's say, complex challenge. And let's just say, so far we're letting the market get in the way. The market is not going to allow us to adapt our housing to meet all of these challenges of decarbonization. Already we have insufficient regulation in rental markets. We have rampant exploitation, let's face it, in the rental markets around Europe. Landlords are in the powerful position can they really be forced to renovate in an inclusive, sustainable way? We are very far from that reality. So unless we face up to the fact that the market cannot deliver the housing and the decarbonisation challenge and the housing challenge, unless the EU faces up to that, we will have an uphill struggle. And unfortunately, the EU is a body which relies extensively on the market, hopes that the market will solve most of our problems when it comes to the energy transition, when it comes to the housing crisis. And I think we can see clearly that this is not going to happen. So what I want to do today is show another way. So currently, the majority of what we see in housing is driving divisions, driving inequality, driving pollution, excluding elderly people, excluding youth, excluding families from cities where they've grown up. We can have another way. We can have housing that we can change this story. In fact, the European Commissioner said it last week at the ministerial meeting in Copenhagen. So Jørgensen, the commissioner responsible for energy and housing, gave an extremely inspiring speech, which I would encourage you to check. He said, we can change this housing story in Europe. And he was inspired by a district that has been renovated by the city of Paris, which has introduced geothermal heating and cooling in housing that is regulated, where the price is regulated, a mix of social and limited profit housing in a neighborhood in Paris. So I think he got a lot of hope from visiting that project, those homes, looking at the decarbonized heating system. And he said, we can change the story. And we in Housing Europe, we are also convinced that this story can be changed. We have the ideas, the creativity at local level. We have also projects which are successful, which can be replicated. We can really change this story with the political will and with the right governance structure. And this just brings me to the new European Bauhaus. Before I open my PowerPoint and show some of the examples, personally, really appreciated the message coming from New European Bauhaus. This message of trying to replicate indeed the original grassroots initiative, which was to make housing much more affordable for much bigger groups of people and to innovate when it comes to materials for that aim. But the message from the New European Bauhaus was together, sustainable, and beautiful. I thought this was really a masterpiece and unexpected. It was a completely unexpected. And for the first time, our members from all over Europe so they are federations of public, cooperative and social housing. They were actually ringing me and saying, how can we get involved? We love the sound of this. Usually it's us trying to tell them, look, there's a directive coming. You need to mobilize, you need to transpose, you need to contact your government. But the New European Bauhaus was something that captured the attention, captured the imagination, particularly from Southern Europe, where they really value the aesthetics and the tradition of beautiful cities. And I think this message of beautiful, sustainable together is exactly what we need. And particularly the word together. It's about housing. If you're homeless or having a home that is energy inefficient or inadequate, is it only your problem? I mean, it shouldn't be. Housing should be a societal problem, societal challenge. And what we really risk positive outcomes when we individualize. It's your fault you're homeless. Oh, you were very lucky because you were able to purchase multiple properties and amass a huge amount of wealth by renting them on short-term letting and not paying tax. Oh, you were very lucky, you were very clever. No, housing has to be, this together is very important. It has to be a societal challenge where we try to have housing that serves society. And yes, some of you, depending on where you live, might feel that we're very far from that. But I think there is hope. We have to have hope and we have to base ourselves on on those projects that work, just like Commissioner Jørgensen for Energy and Housing, I think, got hope from a success story on the ground. This is tangible. This is also why I really, really appreciated the new European Bauhaus, because it's not trying to send a rule, a directive from European level. It's really trying to shape a new vision based on those success stories, based on the creativity and imagination and innovation that is amazing in Europe, in our universities, in our cities, within our architects, our planners, and trying to, let's say, draw, not just send a diktat from Brussels, but to draw on all of that innovation that is there around us, to create, as it's called, a movement. So we really try to support the new European Bauhaus, the spirit of the Bauhaus, by also trying to bring out those successful projects, but also then share, okay, to have more of those projects, what do we need? What type of governance frameworks, finance frameworks, um, what will they look like to make more of those projects? What empowerment for local authorities, for citizens, do we need to have more of those projects? And then what can the EU do? We must face it, EU has limited competence when it comes, this is a national issue. Um, it is a vital, very important force in setting the ambition. So the 2040 decarbonisation targets that are being discussed at the moment under the Danish presidency, for instance, the energy performance of building directives to really bring our building stock to phase out the worst performing buildings by 2030. So member states have to, by the end of this year, put a plan in place, or present their plans for the building renovation plan. So you will have Stefan Moser after this. He might mention that as well. So the EU is vital in, and I think it's even more important now in these times where all of the progressive thinking is being questioned because of what's happening in the US and other countries. Everything is being questioned around the Green Deal, even gender equality. All of the ideas we took for granted are being put to question because of the power of the US narrative. So the EU has to be very strong about an inclusive Green Deal and the frameworks on community energy production, on renewable energy, on renovation of the grid, etc., are even more crucial at this time. So it's a complex regulatory structure, but very much this leadership, obviously, from coming from the EU in terms of putting the regulations on the table, guiding member states on how to implement them is crucial. Then I would just mention on the financing side, indeed, we follow very, very closely what financing potential there is from EU. Some of our members are not interested. So those with the very high countries in the high GDP, they don't really use EU finance. Others, their entire social housing system is actually relying to a large part on EU support, EU de-risking, EU subsidies, favorable long-term loans, technical assistance. So we have a real mix of what profile the EU finance has on the ground. What's crucial coming up also now is the energy, so the ETS, the emissions trading, being extended to buildings and transport. So some of our members worry that this can have a very negative effect, increasing heating and cooling bills for people who actually have no agency to change their heating system. So this is something we are obviously in constant talks with DG Ener, the main DG responsible for this, and DG Klima. But to counteract the potential negative social impact of the increasing tax on polluting heating systems, we have the Social Climate Fund, and their member states have also, I'm not sure if all of them have presented their plans, but there are plans in place to make sure that the finance generated by the extension of the emissions trading to buildings can be used to address structurally inefficiency in housing, and prevent an increase in, let's say, address energy poor. So this is a big part of our work on Housing Europe, is just scanning the horizon. What finance is there? Which of our members at local level can really use it? And trying to bring the actors together to make the funding flow. So these are the sort of these are the pillars of work. And yes, as I said, I was very happy to see that you'd chosen this new European Bauhaus. I'm curious also to hear what you are thinking about the new European Bauhaus. Um, so I have some slides, but I feel like I've touched on the most important issues, and I wonder if you prefer to move on, or how would you like to do it? Just that,
But
you know.
if you have some slides with information, maybe you can show us, and then if there are some real numbers or something, so we can further discuss this.
Yeah. So, yes, as we said, this is the vision for decent and affordable housing in communities where everyone can reach their full potential. And this is the,
Would you like to
let's
go?
say, we talked a lot about speculation in real estate in the housing sector, but this is, let's say, the non-speculative sector. And this you have to different degrees in different countries. You have strong housing cooperatives, very advanced in energy efficiency, sustainability. And you have 43,000 of those spread around Europe. They are maybe public housing companies, housing associations, and housing cooperatives. And let's say they are mixed in terms of their energy performance. In some countries, we have to say they're underfunded, understaffed, so it's a very weak sector. Thinking perhaps it's Portugal, it's only say 2% of the stock overall in the country, well, up to 6% in Porto. So we're talking small numbers, whereas in some countries up to 30%, in Austria, in Vienna, 60, 70% is this limited profit or public housing. So we see that these are the federations present in the different countries. Maybe from people from different countries can see the federation from their country on the screen. And this, let's say, union or grouping has been working for many years together. And a big part of the work is indeed looking at the energy transition and how we can further that. We work on different topics, so policy, research, and innovation project is a big part of our work. So the focus of today, of course, is the next frontiers and innovation, and how we are handling that in the current EU context. So, as mentioned, we have to focus on three issues. So not only sustainability, but also affordability and availability. And this threesome is sometimes quite challenging. If we look at the fair energy transition specifically related to the sector, we see that in France, 46% of social housing is A, B, or C, compared to 25% in the total stock. Austria, 96% of the limited profit stock, so they are limited profit cooperatives, pre-1980, already renovated, compared to 60% in this total stock. Estonia, also doing well because they've managed to organize their privately owned homes that were privatized after the fall of communism. They were privatized, but they managed to establish homeowners cooperatives, which then use a Council of Europe Development Fund to have low interest rates loans for the people living in the home. So it's a system that works extremely well and is also promoted across the Baltics. We also, when we look at decarbonization, we look at the potential of energy production. So this has taken some time to take off, let's say, but in Sweden we start to see extensive use. So Sweden, they have 20% of the homes in the public housing sector, and we start to see extensive microgrids developing in Sweden, which almost become independent from the national grid for 8 months of the year. They're aiming in some cases for 12 months. So they are, let's say, closing off part of the grid, feeding that with PV, fitting batteries, and making that resilient to any shocks to the main grid. We also see in Flanders, Belgium, They've established an energy community using the excellent framework at EU level to install solar PV for consumption in the building itself and directly reduce bills. So excellent example in Flanders, and they worked with the European Investment Bank indeed for the technical and legal assistance to set that scheme up. In France as well, we have auto-consumption, self-consumption in more and more housing. So what we see is there's still difficulty in some countries to establish energy communities. There's the cost of using the national grid is sometimes higher than it basically doesn't pay back to have an energy community because you're spending so much on the grid. But things are moving, and I think it's largely thanks to the EU side that is really pushing that forward. We see that, as I mentioned, yes, I hear something. As I mentioned, making this happen, it's a clear mix of clear regulation that are fixed in the long term. So when it comes to housing, you need a long-term, stable regulatory framework. The same comes for finance and the awareness raising. So a big part is outreach before you do a renovation, but also making sure people living in the homes learn how to use heat pumps, for instance, that they don't treat them in the same way as traditional boilers. So a lot of the energy is put into that by our members as well. So a couple of we went to a little bit more detail into an example in Austria. Why does it work so well? How have they managed to already to refurbish 96% of what was built pre 1980? This is because of the fact that they have taken out the speculative push from a big part of their housing, and it's only because of this. They also have built into their system, into their social or cooperative housing system, renovation funds. So this is part of the financing, that you have this fund, because this we see a big problem in many countries. They have a social housing system with no finance for rehabilitation. Then what happens? Falls into disrepair, becomes stigmatized, and some empty units, and then you have antisocial behavior starts. So you have a downward spiral, and then a bad reputation for social housing or public housing. So it's so important to have the financing right. They also have public grants and loans at state level, sometimes, and also EU funds. Netherlands, also very inspiring. So how do they manage? Because they work based on very successful national agreements, and they've agreed to phase out EF and G by 2030. They have a national plan, but crucial there is the cost neutrality. So they've set up a system where, although the energy bill goes down, the rent goes up, so the total living costs remain the same. So they do have, in the broader housing sphere, many problems now in the Netherlands with affordability, particularly for I think we have quite a few students on this call, so the problems facing students to find affordable housing. However, within the non-speculative sector, they've done very well when it comes to the energy transition. France, all landlords, including social housing providers, legally obliged to renovate housing units EFG to be able to rent them. And you have 0% loans from the Banque de Territoire, and also white certificates. So maybe not to focus too much, I don't want to take too much of your time, but indeed the whole area of sufficiency is gaining more ground, and I think it's vital when we think of how much embodied energy is in our construction materials here in Europe. And of course, the bulk of construction globally will be in the southern hemisphere, where you will see rapid urbanization in the coming decades. But in Europe, we will have to be much more efficient in how we use the existing stock. Therefore, we have to look at change of use of integrated building renovation, brownfield development, designed for disassembly and prefabrication, and bio-based materials, sustainable mobility. Here are a couple of examples. This is from an Irish non-for-profit housing association. They are building, so the non-for-profit sectors and cooperatives are building up to 40% of the housing now in Dublin. I saw in Ireland, I saw in a recent report. This was a very relevant example from Tua Housing, where they had a 62% reduction in whole life emissions when compared to a new build. So they converted these empty offices into homes. And there you see they reduced transport emissions. Also concrete emissions were compared, you see the equivalent 1,600 tons of CO2 equivalent, very low compared to a new build. You see more this more in-depth study on the carbon emissions. 62% reduction in whole life carbon emissions compared with a new build of a similar type. So definitely one of the clear ways we need to go is looking at how, to what extent we have empty buildings that can be converted, and clearly also where the rent then remains affordable as well. In the whole life carbon, in prefab modular retrofitting, so now we focus a lot also in the new affordable housing plan on the potential for prefabrication, industrialization of new construction, but also renovation. And there we have just one example that was paid for via an EU pilot, where the facades were constructed off-site and then fitted and can potentially be reused. Obviously a very small scale example, but nevertheless, as this typology of building is very typical in Ireland, also the UK, partly in the Netherlands, it can potentially, with the right factories, with the right procurement, be scaled up. You see the installation there. There we have another zero carbon neighborhood renovation in Salzburg. And also, this was also under an EU project. You see that EU project funding and pilots really showing the way we need to go in the future. This example of a positive energy district in Denmark, where the renovation took place, but also optimization of the district heating system. And we've collected all those examples. There you see some of the challenges and lessons learned from getting a successful district decarbonization plan. So it's not just about technical issues, a lot about working with the community, gaining trust, adapting your communication methods to different social groups. Okay, I will finish up there.
Okay, thank you, Sohra, for this examples. So I hope you can stay with us. We will have now two responses on your lecture. So for the first response will be given by Stefan Moser, head in DG NR Task Force Housing from European Commission. Stefan Moser was born in Munich in 1971 and trained as an economist and lawyer. He joined the Commission in 2000 in DG Competition to work on control of state aid and public undertakings and services, notably financial institutions. From 2005 to 2009, he worked in DG Environment on climate and environment policy, notably greenhouse gas emission trading, transport emissions, and air quality. From 2009 to 2015, he dealt with the policy coordination, the Secretariat General, in particular on climate, energy, environment, transport, agriculture, and maritime policies. From 2015 onwards, he has served as head of unit in DG Energy, first on energy security and safety, and then on energy efficiency of buildings and products, and now on the task force housing. I must say that Mr. Moser has a really remarkable CV. So please, can you make now in 15 minutes the response to this housing, and maybe you can say what is going on, and is there a future for these aspects of the housing that we want to have them affordable, let's say, and equitable, and what we already mentioned. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Goran, and also Brigitte for welcoming, and to Sorka for this very interesting overview on what we can learn and what we need to focus on. Basically, I think it's extremely useful, and it shows only how rich the experience is already in Europe. I think a lot is thanks to the efforts under the European Bauhaus, really to create a community of practitioners to look into, I would say, several objectives at the same time. As Sorka has said, it's very complex to basically deliver on several objectives at the same time. But this is the balancing act which we have to do, which we have to perform as a society, and really see how we reconcile and bring together sustainability, beauty, quality, which includes also safety and health, inclusiveness, with affordability. And I think we have now been confronted with a number of challenges over time, which have aggravated, which have become worse in terms of affordability. With all the progress being made on sustainability, and also I would say the quality of architecture, so of course still a long way to go, it appears that the affordability challenge has hit many, and far too many EU citizens, but also globally, for a number of reasons, which of course we need to look at. And I think what the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has outlined, it's a social emergency. It's a crisis which affects Europeans, and therefore also needs to occupy and basically take efforts and create efforts at the European level to support member states and all the stakeholders and citizens involved. Having said that, it is clear that member states at various levels, national, regional, and local levels, are and will remain and need to remain in charge. They are the ones who know best what the problems are. They can integrate the wishes of their citizens and know exactly also what are the priorities which need to be solved. The purpose of further EU involvement in that respect, I think with the mandate of our Commissioner Dan Jurgensen to serve as first ever European Housing Commissioner, but also the Housing Task Force, is to really see how we can best support from the European level the member states at the various levels to solve this, to address this. And I think we have various tools at our disposal and various aspects to look at. The European Bauhaus, it's mentioned and highlighted in the title of this lecture, is an initiative which was already launched at the beginning of the last mandate, so in 2019, 2020, basically, in particular, together with the renovation wave, to basically underline what Sorka has mentioned, to also look at the beauty, at the I would say the identity, the emotional, the identification basically of a cultural value of housing and buildings more broadly, while at the same time, as part of the Green Deal at the time, which was launched across a number of policy areas: climate, energy, environment, agriculture, and several others, industry, looked at the regulatory framework, how we can improve basically the different I would say requirements to ensure that there will be a transition to a low carbon and eventually decarbonized society, but also one which is which delivers on material efficiency, scarcity of resources, make sure that we have a responsible lifestyle. So this is something which I think has been put on track, and I think also successfully on track. At the same time, we observed over the last few years that the affordability crisis has sharpened. So that's why we are where we are. We need to reconcile. We need to bring together these different aspects. So on the now decided basically in December, so we are aiming at mid-December to bring forward a package on housing, which basically consists of the European Affordable Housing Plan, but also a communication on the new European Bauhaus, how actually to develop further the new European Bauhaus, a construction strategy, but also a revision of the state aid guidelines, and in close connection to that, I think also the agenda for cities, how to improve cooperation with cities, integrate various initiatives, and also the citizens' energy package. So that will be in close connection, probably and possibly on the same day, but it can also be, of course, always be slightly on another day, basically. But that's basically the current plan, to really see that together. And there's also a close connection, of course, to anti-poverty strategy, anti-discrimination. So that is something which we are going to bring forward from the Commission side a few months later. But the particular aspects of homelessness, for instance, will be addressed both in the housing plan, but also the anti-poverty strategy, to really see that we comprehensively tackle these challenges. I think as part of this overall approach, we need to look at various aspects. On the one hand, of course, the supply side. So the balance, how to address the imbalance and recreate more balance between supply and demand. So on the supply side, we need to see how we can deliver along the lines which Soka has also illustrated, quality, which includes beauty, health, and safety, as I mentioned, but also inclusiveness of neighborhoods, and sustainability in an affordable manner. And some of the approaches were outlined by Soka, for instance, modular prefabricated solutions which reduce the time needed on site, but also more efficient overall processes, digitalization in companies, but also in the administration for planning and permitting, knowing exactly what materials will go in, optimize the use of materials, and also recycle and reuse materials. So that will help. There's lots of innovation already in place, which simply needs to be deployed. It's always a challenge, but it can be done. And there, I think the purpose is really to bring down construction and renovation costs. So significantly, I would say, not just a little bit, but significantly. And what Zorka also mentioned is that there needs to be, of course, in order to keep down and bring down costs, a focus on using what we already have, which is focus on the built environment, and also on possible optimization of the existing building stock, including densification, repurposing, sharing, upsizing up, new approaches basically in neighborhoods, in order to avoid sprawling cities and the use of new land, which is extremely costly. So that is, I think, the big double challenge. On the one hand, it's good for the environment, so to avoid new land take. On the other hand, reduce the cost, because you don't need to develop and buy up new land, use new land. It's a major cost factor. So this is what we are trying to look at in terms of what Europe can do to support member states in that direction, and of course industry. So this always goes together with everyone who needs to be involved, which is industry, which is stakeholders, which is the companies delivering, the SMEs on the spot, the different professions involved in renovation and construction. What can be done to improve and to speed up, to accelerate, while not compromising and reducing the quality and sustainability. So we would like to see this as something which doesn't imply a trade-off. There will always be some trade-off in terms of, I would say, optional elements. You can, of course, have a building which is, I would say, high-end, or is simply above average. But it is a democratic decision what quality we would like to have, what comfort level, for instance, how it should look. Is it a standard building or an exceptional building, basically? So that is discretionary in many ways and requires a decision by the inhabitants, by the citizens. And I think that's only legitimate. So there's some trade-off, but I would say otherwise, other issues cannot be traded off, like safety and I would say climate energy aspects, and also inclusiveness, the different objectives which we pursue in society, to have an accessible building which is also fit for people who are handicapped, elderly, who need to get into the building. Then we have, of course, the demand side, knowing that there are lots of citizens who struggle. So it is often actually those who are newly entering the market, who need an apartment, who need to rent newly. That is in many cases young people, simply because they are young and want to become independent, but it can also be people of any age, and also lots of people who simply need to move because of their jobs, essential workers who may not have sufficient funds to actually find a place close to where they live. And there, I think the questions about the social economy, how to organize, and Soka has also highlighted a number of very good practices in that respect. How to protect the vulnerable, and that involves models which have reduced profits, or responsible investors. So basically, investment behavior which does not exploit, but rather has a long-term, a patient perspective, or even reduce profit. So that is something which limits the pressure on tenants in particular. Of course, there are also models for ownership, etc. But we need to see what is the right balance. How can we make sure that economically it is still possible to produce, and at the same time we protect? So therefore, it requires a close look at what is the situation in a particular member state. How can we move on from a given situation to an improved situation in the future, looking at the good practices, the principles for success, but also at the regulatory aspects which exist at European level, but also, and most importantly, at national, regional, local level, how they interact, how they play together. Various aspects to be looked at, of course, the protection rules, the fiscal rules, regulatory requirements, and that all needs to be somehow, I would say, looked at to improve. So this is something which we really would like to do and develop further, and then feed in a network of member states, of practitioners, which we would like to see and build up as an alliance, which integrates, I would say, in many ways also the European Bauhaus, and works together with the European Bauhaus, the community of practitioners which has been built up there, to develop good practices, for inspiration, for getting ideas, innovation, but also replicate models which have been developed. So that's something which plays a big role. And of course, particular aspects like, as I mentioned, young people, handicapped people, people at risk of discrimination, or who are in unsafe situations, and homeless people. There we need to have a more specific look, even in particular, to make housing available for them, but also then have accompanying support. And of course, member states, especially also at the local and regional level, need to see what is the key challenge. How do we do that based on these good practices? Of course, for all that, you need also funds, money, investments. And that is the idea, to create basically a pan-European platform on investments in housing, which should bring together the various sources of financing, but also, I would say, integrate the private sector. So with contributions from the European level, but also the national level, including the European and national promotional banks, the EIB and national promotional banks, international financial institutions, that they come together with member states, with the Commission, but also the private sector, and really see what can be done to make it more accessible, funding more accessible, to see what are the overall needs, and what can be done to explain, to make accessible, user-friendly, more user-friendly than so far, this situation for project developers, local authorities who basically need financing for certain projects. So that's something which will gradually be built up. There have been pledges already, including from, and notably from the EIB, but also national promotional banks, which increase funding for housing. There has been more flexibility being created by the legislator at EU level, based on a proposal from the Commission, to use unused funding for other priorities for housing. So to redirect that, member states can use these flexibilities, and are encouraged from our side to do so, in order to use the existing funds as quickly as possible. So that's something which is really important. Of course, in that also comes the revision of state aid rules, which creates more flexibility for member states now to that will actually be adopted also in December. So it's being consulted in a public consultation currently to have more flexibility also for affordable housing. Social housing has already been dealt with in the rules in a relatively extensive manner, but also to expand that to affordable housing. So that's very important. I think otherwise member states also are encouraged, and we will work with member states from the Commission side to undertake further reforms through, I would say, the various aspects which are on the table. As said, the housing alliance which we are going to build up will work especially together with the established networks, but also reinforce the dialogue on good practices and try to bring in the experiences and further drive forward the European Bauhaus. I think that's to be really seen together. Quality, basically, in an affordable manner. That I think is the challenge. Sustainable and buildings, housing units, and quality buildings in an affordable manner. That I think is the challenge which we need to see and solve. And we really will look forward very much to working with a broader community on that from the Commission side. We have quite a strong involvement from the member states. I think it's at the request of member states that the Commission has now decided to come in this area more forcefully than so far. There are currently also council conclusions being prepared. The European Parliament has a special committee looking at this topic, is very, very intensively consulting with stakeholders and experts and drawing up its own report, which will be part of this. The President announced, the Commission's President, to have a summit also next year to bring together at the highest level decision makers, including from the stakeholder community. I think that's very important, member states and stakeholders together, to have a common understanding what are the challenges, and the actions which will be proposed by the Commission in the Affordable Housing Plan in December should then be implemented. It will not be the one shot, basically, which solves all the problems. That is clear and needs to be underlined. So it's something which is a kind of program for the next years to put in place together. And I think we count on every one of you. We still have the public consultation going on the Affordable Housing Plan until the 17th of October, so somehow end of next week. And of course, we encourage very much any further contributions from your side in case you haven't done that yet. And then we'll use these contributions also actually for shaping the individual actions in the areas which I mentioned. So thank you very much for your attention, Goran, and of course I'm available for any further exchanges and very happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you for highlighting these important issues, but also for introducing the new policy and strategies that will come out. I think this is the right way to do. As we know, then we will also get maybe some carrots and sticks to regulate this and maybe to get it faster to renovation and affordable housing. Now I will ask my second respondee to give her thoughts on this topic. So I would like to invite Siri Kilkis. Siri is professor at the Middle East Technical University in Ankara, and she's advisor at the Scientific and Technology Research Council of Turkey. Her research focuses on the mitigation potential of urban areas, supply-demand interactions, global and local scales, and sustainable development. She received her doctorate from KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Civil and Architectural Engineering, and Bachelor of Science from Georgetown University in Science, Technology, and International Affairs, where she holds a gold medal in her field. Alongside international awards, she received a high-level fellowship for her research centered on climate change mitigation and urbanization, awarded at the centennial year of the Republic of Turkey. Through her publication, she takes place among the top 2% of scientists in energy, environmental science, and enabling strategic technologies. She serves as a vice chair of IPCC Working Group 3 on mitigation since her election in July 2023, and served as a lead author of the Working Group 3 contribution to the 6th assessment report, focusing on mitigation options, urban systems, and sustainable development linkages. So, Shir, if you can say something about it, but you can also refer to the Ankara, because I was in June in Ankara. I saw so many new neighborhoods, new houses, and new environments. So maybe you can also connect with the local situation in Turkey. Okay, please.
Thank you very much, Goran, for the kind introduction. I would like to thank the organizers for this panel, which is very timely, including when a public process is ongoing to connect decarbonization and affordable housing together. So I would like to first start by trying to connect what we heard in the lecture and the response so far, as well as all the scientific contributions that has been taking place this week. So some of the messages that resonate very much is that targeted mitigation action for smart energy systems can lead to lower energy costs, and in the operational phase of the buildings, this does lower the energy bills for citizens. And it doesn't really stop when we make a single building affordable. It's really about urban planning, about integrate urban planning. Where is that building located? Is it accessible to public transport, to jobs? How close is jobs and housing together? So it's within a broader perspective. And we also need to look at the system aspects. Can we connect some of the climate policies with social policies, and how can we increase the sustainability of that in the longer term? So I would also like to mention that empowering citizens to have the agency for change is always an ongoing discussion. We need to find ways to empower citizens for energy communities. Then another aspect that I heard is that how can we really make sure that elderly population, which can have more vulnerability to energy poverty, that also can impact their health, how do we address this? And for example, the youth, they can be affected by extreme heat also in the urban areas more, together with the elderly population. Repurposing, very important message that we also heard coming from the sixth assessment cycle of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And how do we keep cities from sprawling? This is a very important topic. And can we make cities that are good for the people, good for the environment, while also limiting new land uptake? So in this sense, again, urban planning and repurposing have a very central role. So within these quick reflections on what I heard, I wanted to organize my interventions into some key messages. The first one that I wanted to give is that it's very important that affordable housing is combined with opportunities where accessibility and sustainability within the urban area is realized, including through integrated urban planning. And the findings that I want to give for this is there was a section in the sixth assessment cycle of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change on combining housing policies with carbon taxation can deliver both housing and mitigation in the transport sector. And there was some findings related to this. So reducing emissions from transport in cities through traditional climate policy instruments can be more difficult, for example, when inner urban neighborhoods are less accessible and less affordable. So again, we need to find ways to keep households inwards rather than trying to put some policy that might push them outwards. And there was some findings that said policies making inner urban neighborhoods more accessible and more affordable can open up broader opportunities for suburban households to relocate in the face of increasing transportation costs. And there were some more findings like this. But this is coming from how we can combine low carbon mobility options, together with affordable housing. Again, how do we place that within the greater urban planning perspective? For example, when we think about urban areas, there isn't just one type of urban area. There are urban areas that are already established, where a lot of the infrastructure is already in place, a lot of the roads in place. What are the entry points for those cities? Electrification, connecting them to decarbonized electricity is a possibly good entry point for such established cities. But when we look into maybe more rapidly growing cities or newly built urban areas, they might have other entry points to an integrated urban strategy that can come from integrated urban planning. Where do we locate those buildings? How close is it to accessible transport, etc.? The second message that I would like to give is that revenues that may be derived from other climate mitigation policies can support the implementation of actions and increase public support while avoiding carbon lock-in. So there was, for example, revenues derived from climate policies could provide additional resources to support such programs. For example, when these revenues are directed to low-income groups or those who do not have accessible to affordable housing. And it was seen and observed that higher support for climate policy packages is usually seen when affordable housing programs are included. So this is very relevant. And just a recent publication that was a systematic review and meta-analysis of literature looking into how public support for carbon pricing policies and revenue recycling options can go hand in hand. They covered multiple studies, 26 countries, and over 100,000 respondents. So this was a very comprehensive look into this, and they found that green spending, for example, using revenues from climate-friendly projects also matched with social policies in the revenue recycling option can be associated with a statistically significant increase in public support. And the public support, for example, for green spending increased to 97% for all regions. And then they had different percentages, around similar percentages from 83 upwards for different regions. So public support for such policies increased to at least 83% supporting these policies when such revenue recycling options were considered. And it's always important to avoid carbon lock-in, because what we do now in our cities, the infrastructure there can last for 10 years, 20 years, 30, and 50 years upward. So when we are looking into construction, always, how do we avoid carbon lock-in? So many investments in infrastructure and sectoral capital have very long times, and because of this, they need to be considered as early as possible for a sustainable process forward. This brings me to another message, that urban action towards climate neutrality is already involving measures to ensure affordable and environmentally friendly housing, also taking into account the distributional effects, and these good practices need to be diffused even more. There's a very relevant, and I believe some of the slides mentioned this, initiative on climate neutral and smart cities. And each of these cities are producing climate city contracts. And from the beginning, when they expressed their interest, they also asked, what transversal actions are you taking to ensure that the policies towards climate neutrality also meets and benefits the citizens living in those cities? And when we look into these climate city contracts, you can view all of them, in fact, that have received their labels so far. I just want to give 3 examples. This is coming from Riga in Latvia. In their climate city contracts, they say the criteria for affordable and environmentally friendly housing will be taken into account in developing and implementing the housing policy, including through energy efficiency, sustainable materials used in construction, principles of circular economy, and also air quality. So a relatively good example. There's also the Barcelona Climate Neutrality Action 2030, along similar actions in the other cities. And here, Barcelona mentioned the creation of a public-private investment fund for the energy refurbishment of existing buildings, as well as the creation of new affordable housing. So again, very much aligned with the discussions that we have been having in this panel so far. Then Oslo, again in the Climate Neutrality Action Plan 2030, the city has processes in place to ensure that distributional effects are assessed and that climate mitigation measures are formulated in support of a socially sustainable city which offers equal opportunities to all. So Oslo, action by action, they're looking at the distributional effects and ensuring that policies are in place to have the most sustainable, most inclusive result for all. And when 112 cities that were selected to be mission cities in this European initiative were analyzed, looking into their expression of interest, there were some interesting results that was observed in this. For example, when cities said, what are the favorable conditions that can support your city going to climate neutrality, they listed a list of measures that could give them these favorable conditions. First one, ranking the first in their perspective, was supportive local research environment. Cities ranked this favorable condition first, believing that when they collaborate with universities in their cities or when they collaborate with research institutes in the cities, even helping them connect their energy modeling pathways with social results, they could go further. So this was a top favorable condition, and this is also a call for researchers. We need to collaborate more with cities because cities see these institutions, their universities and research institutes, as one of the most favorable conditions supporting them on their journey. Then when they said, when they were asked what is a possible barrier that you can address, they said it's the fragmentation of responsibilities. When in the cities, a different department looks into transport, or a different department looks into buildings, and a different department maybe looks at the climate when all of this is all integrated. That type of fragmentation of responsibilities across different departments, they said something has to be done about this. But what has been done since, when they expressed their interest, cities changed their climate governance. They wanted to make their climate governance more inclusive, and they have been doing so. Many of them put into place new climate governance structures to transform relatively what was in the past more siloed approaches into integrated approaches. And this is very much seen as a push forward by cities going towards climate neutrality and shifting their outlook on having more integrated policies, more integrated action, and really saying what is good for the planet is also good for the people, and ensuring policies are there in a comprehensive manner, also addressing the energy poverty. So these would be my 3 remarks that I had and wanted to add to the discussion. Again, I very much enjoyed the examples given in the presentation, also relating to repurposing, trying to empower more even the energy communities, and also optimization of district heating systems. I think these are very promising, especially when combined with social housing. And I'm eager to hear more examples also in this aspect. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cher, for your contribution. Now we will continue with the panel discussion between panelists. We heard that, or we know that maybe the prices of apartments or the square meter of apartment is skyrocketing in at least in Croatia. So also there is harder and harder to now find the workers to work in construction industry. And now we heard that we are putting some, let's say, more principles to construction. So maybe there will be really increase of the housing costs. So can we somehow stop it or decrease it? Could you comment on this? Maybe Sorha, you have some experience with your cooperatives, etc., or Stefan or Shiruk. Can you say, you know, we are just demanding more and more, but on the other side, Stefan, you said we need to decrease the cost. So can we somehow make it work, or it will just go one direction in increased prices and increased housing costs? Can you comment? Okay, Sohra.
Hi, Goran. Sorha needed to go. She can't stay until the panel
Okay,
discussion. So, yeah.
so we will continue without her. Then Stefan, maybe you can comment then on this.
No, thank you, Goran. I think this is really the objective, to reduce the resources needed and the costs basically for solutions which ensure quality and sustainability. And I think one really needs to see how to solve a particular issue. For instance, in high pressure areas, the question is of course also, as mentioned, to look at the broader territorial planning. When it comes, for instance, to scarcity of land, is it possible to improve the connections basically with other parts of the region, so that there's a larger area that people can move and come to work and live maybe not too far away, and it doesn't take so much time. So it is not possible to solve everything in high pressure areas themselves. But there, I think the issue is really how we can construct and renovate in a more affordable manner by reducing costs through solutions such as prefabricated ones, also choosing materials which are possibly less expensive but still deliver on the quality and the safety also needed. For instance, in Croatia, of course, you always have to pay a lot of attention to seismic safety. Yeah? So, and of course, fire safety is an issue, so that has to be factored in. And I think the good practices which can be developed and which have been developed, they need to be deployed. So there's a lot of potential already to reduce. But I would underline also, as just mentioned, the need to have integrated planning, to bring together the different parts of the city government, the regional government, and have I would say, a consensus reached with citizens. In which direction do we need to move? What are the challenges to address? One issue of particular attention, for instance, in Croatia, is tourism. Yeah? So how to manage tourist flows, which are good for the country, but of course in certain areas, notably coastal regions or the capital, can actually lead to an unfortunate competition with the resident population, so that actually there's not enough space for everyone in the classical sense, or their prices would be driven up so high. So the question is then how to manage tourism in a country in a sustainable manner, but of course avoiding any, I would say, harsh measures, but by incentivizing, by directing in a way which basically serves the interests also of tourism, but at the same time protects the legitimate interests of the resident population. So I think that's very important as well, to have a broader picture and not just look in, I would say, in a very limited and narrow manner at housing. We cannot just construct more and more and more and even renovate more and more and more without limits in a particular place. We have to see what is the potential from that, and what actually solutions would have to bring in other areas which are better connected, mobility, but also digital connections, and how to manage, for instance, tourist flows. Yeah? So in that respect, also the President of the Commission announced that we would improve further the legislative framework on short-term rentals for tourism in particular. But short-term rentals also play a role for essential workers, for seasonal workers, farm workers, for instance, or in nursing or services which are essential for the country. So it's not something which is bad. It is something which needs to be managed consciously and in a balanced manner.
Yes, thank you for this. I think we are now here in Dubrovnik, the city that is really touristic one, and they are planning to restrict now the renting of the houses to a certain level to tourists, and build new apartments for renting. So they really want to build apartments for new families, etc. So this is, you're right, and I think your point of view for watching on the regional level and see where it is lower pressure, maybe to find new construction, etc. So, Shir, do you want to comment this on prices and maybe cheaper houses? Okay.
Well, just to add to your example, Goran, I heard and learned while I was in Dubrovnik that children who are living outside of the area to have schools, relatively good schools, and access to good schools, there are apartments dedicated only to young population. So rather than commuting every day to the relatively outer areas of Dubrovnik, they are living in these apartments. I want to give the message, it's important to think of all ages. Students of all ages, accessibility and affordability for all ages. So this could be an entry point. In the first round of questions you asked about Ankara, which I can give you, we talked about urban planning. Ankara does have a master plan, very much created to make a compact and relatively efficient city. When I was young, when you say Middle East Technical University, it was really on the outskirts of the city. But now, Middle East Technical University is right now in the center of the city. So you can see a sense of how much the urban area has expanded due to population growth. We have rural to urban migration, but at the same time, we try to put in place infrastructure to accommodate that. We increased our green area in the city while trying to have some public support to ensure that prices are not increasing as much. But if I'm able to speak on behalf of all cities here, yes, rising prices need to be seen as a risk and they need to be managed as a risk. There are artificial intelligence type of activities to see, okay, given these prices, where will urban development expand to? But this is just business as usual. We do not want to continue as business as usual. And when we say, okay, let's go to artificial intelligence, ask how is the urban area going to look, and it's just projecting existing trends, this is not the way to go. The way to go is through integrated urban planning, through integrated climate governance structures that can address the fragmentation of responsibilities. And it's really about, in both the sense of climate crisis that we're having, and cities are responsible, urban areas are responsible for 67 to 72% of consumption-based emissions worldwide. It's really about decarbonization. It's really about changing lifestyles together with efficient urban infrastructure. So there's a lot to do, but at the same time, as Europe is doing, seeing this rising prices as a risk and mitigating that in an integrated manner with the rest of the policies.
Okay, thank you. Stefan, you mentioned there is a technology innovation that, with technology, new materials or prefabricated materials, we can speed up the construction, make it maybe even cheaper and more affordable. But should we look also innovation in some financial schemes, or maybe this organization of citizens, etc.? So like some kind of cooperatives that are active, etc. Do you think this is maybe one of direction, or maybe you have some examples where this is already in a place, where we have some, let's say, innovative financial scheme or some cooperative that can be used like this for...
Yeah. Thank you, Goran. I think there are two aspects. One is the how to use best scarce financial resources from the public sector, so that actually the volumes will be generated with the help of private actors, like guarantees and taking over risks, reducing the risks, so that actually financing becomes cheaper. So that is very important to be innovative, but also replicate already existing practices and existing financial instruments, and use them more broadly across the different housing investments which need to be taken. And I think it should also, I would say, we should also try to create more clarity on responsible investment behavior. And that links then basically to actually private market actors which are ready to invest in the long term, but have a more patient and, I would say, socially responsible perspective. That can be normal investors, like I would say pension funds, insurances, but it can also be as SOCA represents, the socially responsible investors with limited profit expectations. And I think in the member states where there are the most successful approaches towards housing, where basically the housing challenges have been addressed best, they play a relatively large role. And this is partly tradition or partly has been put in place newly or reinforced. But we see that really where there's a kind of organized and I would say established socially responsible housing community, can be cooperatives, can be limited profit associations, various ways of doing that, land trusts, for instance, there actually the pressures go down. And I think they also have approaches which are more, I would say, integrating democratic principles, so inclusive approaches, participatory approaches with the residents, with the people who live there. So I think in the member states where this is not a tradition as much as in others, I think there could be a move towards that in order to at least create a segment of the housing market which follows these principles. And I think that's what we would like to encourage also. I think there's not necessarily so much a need to invent lots of completely new things, but rather to see what works best under which principles, under which conditions, and can be integrated in the I would say housing framework of a member state where this so far has maybe been underrepresented. So that's the idea also of I would say really bringing together and creating a conversation and overcoming possible, I would say, inertias in reacting, because of course there are different interests involved. And I think we have to be clear that many interests are of course legitimate. So they're legitimate, but I think by creating conversations and having open exchanges, in particular then also informing authorities in the member states about all options and going into depth and allowing for exchanges and facilitating exchanges with other member states and of course also internationally, this can really, I would say, overcome possible blockages which have existed. So I think that's something which we would like to encourage also from the European side.
Okay, thank you. I also agree with you that maybe new European Bauhaus will help us to replicate these best practices from the European Union of different member states, not just to reinvent the wheel, but to make something work, just replicate it. Okay, now maybe we could have now questions from the audience, both online or here in the room. So if are there any questions or comments for until now? Zina, you are managing the online participants, so maybe if there is a question.
I have one question, Zina, maybe I can interrupt.
Okay, please.
Firstly, thank you for all speakers. It was really nice to hear all your ideas. From the presentations, I realized that in the European level, what was mentioned that for housing to be more sustainable and affordable, it should be renovated from the examples given in the European level as well. But I feel like in Turkey, in Ankara, I also grew up there, and I feel that Turkey stands a bit different in this topic, that they, rather than renovating the buildings, they would like to destroy and build up new buildings to be more sustainable or affordable. And I was curious what kind of strategy is behind this. Maybe Sir Kukushkus can answer this question.
Sure, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for this direct match of thinking. I agree with you. First of all, it can relate also to the quality of building restructuring that was done. So part of the buildings that are being, demolished and rebuilt again, they are doing it for, being more safety. We are not as prone to earthquakes as other areas, but some buildings are being newly built to make it stronger. Of course, it could have been reinforced, and rather than demolishing buildings, reinforced in that way. But I do see a lot of new construction some of which could be a little bit replicating. It could be, for commercial purposes, residential purposes, but sometimes just to build, we see buildings being constructed into the parks, and districts that were once maybe more livable, more appreciable, are now being transformed into places we cannot really recognize. So I think this is also within keeping the sense of identity, keeping the sense of culture of existing neighborhoods, and when renovating, making sure that the landscape and the urban landscape is preserved while doing, if it's necessary refurbishment, but at the same time making sure that is applied to the master plan and all the optimization that must be in place at the same time. More multidisciplinary and multidimensional approaches are needed on this. And one thing I haven't mentioned yet is the multidimensional indicator of the SDEWES index, which does try to rank the existing levels of performances of cities into multiple dimensions, including their energy use, renewable energy, water, environmental quality, including air pollution, urban planning and social welfare, as well as research, development, innovation, and sustainability policy. So it's a multidimensional effort, and I think the integration of governance structures supports cities being more integrated is a way forward in this, but we do need more tools, more geographical information systems, collaborate together with the universities, research institutes taking place to make sure that such wasteful use of energy, resources, materials do not take place, and minimized, if not avoided. So I do agree with you, and we need more action all across urban areas, not only in Ankara, but really we see this as a replicating pattern, so this needs to be addressed from a multidimensional perspective.
Okay, thank you. Sure. I hope the answer was comprehensive, so it satisfies.
Yes, so much.
Okay. Okay, Stefan, would you like to comment this, or maybe if you know?
I think on the principle is really renovate, use existing structures, the built environment as much as possible. But I think that always is subject to an assessment of the quality of what exists. Can it still be used? Is it reasonable? I think that's needs to be subject to a comprehensive assessment. So it can be justified, of course, to not to use it, but to demolish and build new. So it's not an absolute paradigm, I would say, but it's a principle. And of course, if it's decided to demolish, of course, also the materials can be reused. So, and I think it's also a question of how to deal with what remains of a building in order to recycle, to reuse at least what remains. But in principle, of course, existing structures are valuable from an economic point of view, but also from a climate point of view, because it requires lots of energy and also produces greenhouse gas emissions to build from scratch and tear down. So that's why, in principle, should be prioritized to at least integrate existing structures, even if a building becomes larger, for instance, or simply improved in terms of performance overall.
Okay, what I can say about refurbishment and renovation in Turkey is that I've been visiting the old castle, and it was the really old houses were refurbished, and now people were returning to it. So for me, it was quite nice to see. And here in the city of Dubrovnik, we have a medieval city where people are still living, or in more to the, let's say, northwest, we have city of Split, where people are living in the houses that are built 2,000 years ago. So it's still, let's say, some kind of sustainable thing. But there is a place for renovation, and of course, by following the standards, new one that we can do it. So. Are there any more questions from online audience or here? Okay.
We have some questions from the chat. The question is, do you know any intergenerational projects that would foster togetherness of elderly with young in need of affordable housing?
Can you repeat, Zina?
Yes. The question is, do you know any intergenerational projects that would foster togetherness of elderly with young in need of affordable housing?
Okay, is anyone aware of these projects where we will combine this? Shir or Stefan or anyone?
I mean, there are a number of such projects. I cannot, of course, now mention very specific ones. Don't have any slides, but I think there are. The principle is that basically, in particular, where buildings become too large for elderly citizens, the former family houses, that they would be, for instance, used also for people coming in and that you combine that with help, support, occasional support to the older people and the for instance students or trainees can simply then have of course the space for their studies and their training, and that I think is one aspect. Another one of course is where in a multi-apartment building there would be a kind of mix really of people who occasionally need help, like shopping, etc., or coming to chat from a social perspective with younger people. So that actually recreates to some extent a village atmosphere then, yeah, in a city. And I think that can really be useful. But I think the idea comes very much from the aspect of using better buildings which have formerly been family houses, which are now under-occupied by one or two people and have still, I would say, a few rooms left. So that can be very usefully then offered to at a reduced rate with some promise of support basically to the elderly citizens. I mean, this is one example. There are many others, and I think it has many side benefits in the sense of overcoming loneliness, more human, I would say, interaction, and simply also feeling at home. Yeah. So instead of an anonymous situation where people would sit alone in their apartments. So I think that is something which we would like to encourage. It has to be, these projects often have to be driven, of course, from the local level. Where is there a potential? Where are such buildings which may be underused, which could be actually then moved into a more intergenerational approach? And what could be the incentives also for elderly citizens, for instance, to open up the former family houses? Because often there's a kind of, I would say, maybe first reticence or skepticism. Should I really do this? But I think there are lots of examples which actually show that this will not be regretted in many ways. Of course, something can go wrong, that people don't fit to each other. But I think if a city accompanies that actively and helps citizens to match basically also, then I think there can be really good successes in that respect.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is one of the approaches that can be taking into account that elderly people has maybe apartments or that are bigger of their needs, and then they can share it. And personally, I can say that as a student, I was been in this situation when I was renting the room from the lady that has been, so it was really a nice win-win situation, I should say. Okay, so we have here a question from the audience. So please.
Thank you, Goran, and Shir, and all speakers. This is Birol Kılkış from Ankara, Ostim Technical University. Speaking about and the quest of cheaper and affordable and energy efficient buildings, there are new technologies that I would like to just recollect, like prefabricated buildings with all the wiring, all the plumbing, everything, internet connections ready. The specialized, well-trained workers just snap them together. And the building with like 3 floors high can be finished in terms of or matter of weeks or even days. Like in China, this has been quite a big industry. And also, even if I want to stretch a little bit further, it is 3D printed buildings. They cost about only 10,000 euros up to 50,000 euros. And therefore, these should be, although they are at stage of development, some more trials, I think EU should also focus on these such new technologies. And in this respect, my question is, are such or similar new technologies are on the table? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, Stefan, maybe you can say if you are aware of it, or maybe there are new projects or some new calls for this, because it's part of the policy.
Absolutely agree. I think there can be really high quality solutions in that respect of near finished or nearly finished prefabricated solutions, which include, as just mentioned already, all the necessary components, wiring, etc., sockets, everything is there. So I think that is a very important mechanism to reduce costs. Yeah? So, and from the outside and even from the inside, you would not notice that it's a prefabricated building. So it's something which at least can be done very attractively, and it's one of the methods really to bring down significantly the costs. Yeah? So, and that exists also for renovation. So it's of course for new builds, but also components to renovate, to insulate, for instance, on the roof, the windows. This can be done. Of course, not always. I think we are not saying that such solutions are adequate for each and every project, but it is something to be considered, and I think expanded from the practices which exist. I think the construction and renovation sector still has a relatively traditional way of dealing with things, and that is absolutely appreciated, and I think valued as such. But I think there's a balance needs to be found towards more modular prefabricated solutions in order to bring down the costs while not sacrificing the quality and sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Now we are approaching the end of the session, so maybe Shir or Stefan, would you like to say some final words? Then I can summarize and close the session. Yeah.
First of all, maybe I can add on the prefabricated aspect. So I think it's important to utilize new technologies in a way that do make buildings more affordable, cleaner, and maybe not even, why not even include some renewable energy options in such prefabricated designs. So rooftop, walls, anywhere with new maybe passive, active systems all together. So I do think that's important. We need collaboration. We need collaboration across disciplines. We need the architects working together, the technicians even, the engineers, urban planners, everyone really, environmental scientists. So it's a cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary objective. It's a system perspective, so it's not just making one building affordable, but really an entire city planning perspective in order to make sure the location of that building is not only affordable, but also accessible. So there are different criterion to for example, when we say transit-oriented development or green transit-oriented development, that really needs to be connected with the rest of the city. So I would say we've had a good panel, a timely panel. I hope some of these inputs are also taking into account in the public process itself. And I would say that let's continue the action to renovate, refurbish, repurpose the buildings to make them more sustainable, connected to the renewable energy, empowering the citizens, empowering the citizens of all ages, and we can work together to make this happen.
Thank you, Shir, for the strong message. Stefan, would you like to add something?
No, thanks a lot. Really, very much agree with what you said, Shirin. And other participants. I think there are some questions left in the chat, which you may not see actually,
Okay, yes.
as you are on the podium. So one on Erasmus, basically. Erasmus is the student exchange program in Europe. I think we want to look at that in order to make sure that actually the support to students and trainees is as much as needed to make use of the cross-border training and education abilities. It makes no sense, of course, to have a scheme which simply is not, I would say, fit for purpose, and where people could not use the mobility offers to make experience elsewhere. But I think also more broadly, students and trainees need to be supported even if they don't get a special scholarship, in the sense of offers on campus, for instance, close to the training institutions. That is crucial and requires, of course, an assessment how much is needed, and then what can be offered on site or close to the site, so that they would actually no longer have to compete with the resident population, and to overcome also some real, I would say, competition and even bad developments that the resident population would actually protest against students, as they do in some places also against tourists, for understandable reasons, but this is not what we want as a society. So that's very important. Then another question is actually about empty apartments, so vacant buildings. So not only underused, because maybe a former family house is now occupied by just one elderly person, but empty. And I think what we like to see also and analyze further, but also encourage the use of appropriate instruments, is to discourage socially undesirable behavior, like leaving apartments vacant, empty, or underused for reasons which are not objectively justified, like, for instance, the need to renovate over a certain time, or because there's any other good reason. Can come from speculative behavior, of course. There, of course, or luxury behavior, that you will simply have a second or third or fourth home, which is used just a few weeks per year, and other people would need it, don't have access. So this, of course, can be addressed partly by discouraging such behavior by fiscal measures, taxation, or even bans. Yeah? So I think that can be justified. It's important for member states to take a proportionate view on that, not to overshoot, but also to use the available instruments they have at their disposal to really address this. Then there's also a question about demolition, again from Finland, or comment rather. So I think that's what I meant also, that reusing and using the parts from a demolition is very important. It's circular economy, and avoid that this is just landfilled. So there are very good practice in that respect, to basically recycle, reuse to a very large degree the debris from a building. Then there's a question, also a comment from Portugal about this possibility for elderly people to live together with students, as you also mentioned, Goran. I think it does exist. It can be expanded. I think mutual benefit, and lots of students could find a home, and elderly people benefit if this is really replicated. And there can be platforms which encourage that. There can be financial incentives, even in terms of reducing the tax rates, for instance, on what people pay, and so on, and then it's even more interesting for everybody. When it comes to actually the interrelationship between cities and the rural areas, which can be in the same region nearby, I think we would not say that the attractiveness of cities should be reduced, but rather the contrary. The attractiveness of rural areas should be increased, because we often have buildings which are affordable, which are available in rural areas. And that's what I meant before in terms of improving transport connections and moving jobs to those areas where possible. Encourage investments in those areas, creating jobs, possibly from the public authorities, possibly from private companies with some incentives to really do that, because we can't, of course, have even further an urbanization movement, at least try to reverse it to some extent, that people who are in rural areas have life chances, that there's investment in social infrastructure, in schools, hospitals, access to doctors, shops, cultural activities, sports, so that basically young people are not basically compelled so much to move away. Education facilities, I think there needs to be a more balanced development of the territory of member states. Of course, there are limits to that, that's obvious, but I think we need to expand this in order to take away pressure or even increasing pressure on the urban hot spots, high pressure areas. So I think that's very important. And then the last one, I think, is on innovative production methods. Biofabricated materials, very important from a climate point of view, but also they're not more expensive. They just need to be, I would say, also explained where they can be used. There's never a solution, just one thing, but there are options to do that. And I think also good practices can be showcased, which allow for replicating and expanding these practices. So this is what I wanted to say, just in relation to the channel, to the chat. Thank you very much, Goran and Shir.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. After this panel, I can say that European Task Force on Housing is in good hands. So I just can thank you and say that maybe your messages will become action soon, and we will really have a change on the ground. So once again, I would like to thank Sohra, Shir, and Stefan for the contribution for giving these questions and comments in the panel. And of course, I would like to thank ESEA and TU Graz for this organization of the panel. And finally, I would like to thank our technicians and everyone who is running behind these screens and everything, being so late with us and making this happen. So let's hope that we will have inclusive, sustainable and beautiful houses and housing in Europe in next decades to come. So with this, I would like to finish the panel and thank you all for contribution. Thank you. See you around there. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Yeah? So bye-bye.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure being here.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.